In this video, I'm going to talk about the shifts that I recommend that agencies make in order to build a more predictable, scalable, and exitable business. So I run these change programs with agencies, also other professional service firms, consultancies. And what I do is I typically help them with a couple of things. I help them transform the part of their business that is stuck in the old ways, if I can use that term. I'll explain what I mean by that. I also help them scale. So, scale up the things that are working to help them from, getting stuck usually at between 1 and 4 or 5 million in revenue. And then thirdly, what I do is I help them build the enterprise value to prepare them for an exit if that's what they want. So what I want to do is I want to explain what the changes I would make to your business if you were one of those businesses that run it like through the traditional model, why I would do that and how you would be better off. And so in my philosophy, in my thinking, and this is all based on the Simple Company method, which you can find over at thesimplecompany.com, by the way, I really think that most agencies and most consultancies for that matter, they make their life really, really hard. I'm talking about the owners, I'm talking about the leaders, I'm talking about the founders. Why? Because they mostly sell custom services to clients. In other words, it's based on like a goodwill creating model where what we're doing when we're going to clients, we're listening in on their problems and then we're asking ourselves, can we solve this problem? And we always come up with a way to say, yes, we can solve this. And then we go and build maybe a new solution, maybe a new process, something that maybe we haven't done before, or we haven't really systematized and standardized that process. And when we do that, we're always selling something different to a different client. There's no coherency, which means that model is simply not scalable. It's super burdensome. It's hard to run, even though it might be creatively, satisfying, but it's a very different model, especially if you want to grow to, beyond 5 or 10 million in revenue. It's a very hard model because it's also very heavy in terms of you have to hire a lot of different people and you're very dependent on typically a few clients to make your business work. So as the owner, you might really feel that you are extremely stressed and you're always overwhelmed. You're always out of time. I've been there, by the way. I built a few agencies, consultancies over 13 to 15 years of my life. And, it was only 5-6 years ago that I transitioned into helping professional service firms avoid the pains that I went through, although it was also a really wonderful journey. So I love agencies. I love creative agencies. I love branding. I love, So that's why this is why I kind of made it my mission to help other people in professional services. I love professional service firms, consultancies, agencies. I love it. I love this whole game, although I think it's quite difficult to make it work. And of course now all these industries are getting disrupted through AI and so forth. I'm not going to get into that. I do believe, by the way, I'll just park this. I do believe this is the best time to be in professional services despite AI, because we can use AI and technology in so many ways to reach so many more clients. What would be the main changes that I would want you to do in your business to make it more predictably profitable, scalable, while you're building enterprise value and making your company more exitable? Meaning that you can walk away from the business, sell it at a good price, which you don't have to do, by the way. But building a company with an exit in mind is very smart for many reasons. Even if you think you're never going to exit, you're going to exit one day. We're all going to die, right? But if you wanted to exit as the operator, if you want to become just solely the owner or the strategist, or you will have to do certain things to make your company exitable and ideally build it in a way that becomes much more valuable. And so all these ideas are based on achieving these things: higher profitability, more predictability, scalability, and exitability. And yes, that's a word right now. So the first thing I would do a diagnosis of your business. The way that I like to do that, by the way, is I use a tool that I developed. I call it the money equation. It has 6 factors. In fact, it's the only 6 factors that directly contribute to revenue and profit in your business. And here's what they are. Number one, I'd look at how are you generating leads? How many leads are generating? How are you doing that? And where are all those best leads coming from? By the way, there are two ways to do this. It's like the generic, I want to know the numbers, the conversions, which I'll talk about. I also want to do an 80-20 analysis. I want to understand where are the majority of the results coming and which are the minority drivers of those majority results. And so 80-20 is a really powerful way to really understand where you should be focusing to achieve the highest possible profitability and look at really what's the potential part of your business. So number one, I mentioned leads. I want to understand how are you getting leads? Do you have a system in place? I want to map that. I want to understand where the best leads are coming from. How many of those leads are you converting into paying clients? How are you doing it? What's your process? Is it systematized, etc.? I want to know that. I want to know what amount of money, what's the average price per transaction that you're selling. So we can look at all the different projects you're selling or all the recurring revenue and take, and look at how many clients you have. We'll find an average. Now, the average is very important, but we also want to understand what lies behind the average. Again, it's the 80-20 principle. We're looking at, okay, maybe only about 20% of your clients bring in 80% of profits or revenue, and that's usually the case. So we want to then ask ourselves a bunch of questions. Which ones do we want to keep? What do we want to focus on, etc.? I mentioned leads, conversions, average price per transaction. I want to understand how many times do you sell a client on average, so number of transactions over a period of 12 months typically. Then I want to understand your profit margin. How much profit are you keeping? I'd like to ideally understand per project if you're selling projects, but also just want to know what your profit margin is. And then finally, number 6, I want to understand what is your cost structure, your fixed costs, your operating expenses. So that's the money equation. I want to understand the money equation. I want to make a diagnosis. I want to understand how money flows into your business, how it flows out your business, how much you're keeping, and what are the core drivers. Now, based on that, we can have an informed discussion and we can talk about how you can improve the business, how you can improve the 6 only areas that directly link to the amount of money you're bringing into the business and how much you're keeping. Now, that's only the diagnosis piece, so bear with me. I'm going to get into the most fundamental question here is positioning and proposition and business model. So I'm going to talk about those just briefly. Positioning. The most common problem that I see really when you look at professional service firms is positionings are all over the place. They're vague. They're super broad. It's very hard to understand why specifically I should work with you. And so I like positionings that are very specific. I like that agencies are very clear about who they're here to serve, what particular problems they're good at solving, and how they do that, and why specifically people should choose you within a given context. And as an industry, we suck at this. We maybe have looked too much at the consumer goods, the mass consumer goods models for positioning, and we're just like all over the place where we're describing big lofty ideas and a bunch of categories, and we're not really clear about what we're uniquely equipped to do better or differently than somebody else. And so I like the positioning to be niched. I don't like full service agency. I don't like 360 because you can't own that. That's not really positioning unless you're WPP maybe. But for everyone else, that's not a good positioning. So I really want to look at what is something that you can do repeatedly that is linked to your capabilities and that's linked to a market opportunity. The second thing is the proposition. And now we get into the really juicy stuff. Like this is what I'm really all about, is transitioning away from selling time, charging for time in various forms and charging for value and really selling outcomes. I like to talk about selling a few, maybe let's say 3 transformation journeys. And at the front of the transformation journey where you deliver a big result consistently, specifically for a client, you build front-end offers that are productized. Now, this is very, very important. Productization is one of the key things that I'm known for. It's what I've done with 500 to 1,000 clients by now. And I did it in my own business. It helped me get 45% net profit margins in my own business. And I'm just a super believer. Productizing, standardizing, systematizing. These might sound like boring words to you, but they translate into growth, profitability, predictability, scalability, and exitability, which is hopefully what you want. Because when you productize, you make it easier for clients to buy. You make it a lot easier for you and your people to sell, and you help them by converting people into front-end offerings, which should be easy to get to know you, build a relationship with you, and then you hopefully build really great recurring revenue offerings at the back of that. Now, I could go on and I talk about this a lot more in some other videos, but because it's going to be way too long if I go too deep into this, I want to just remind you, we spoke about the positioning. Why should they choose you? Who are you specifically serving? In which way? How are you delivering value? And what are the big transformations that you are uniquely capable of delivering? So proposition, that was number 2. Now, the third thing is the business model. And let's also talk about revenue model. How do you make money? How does it all work? Well, your positioning, your proposition is part of your business model. What I would want you to do is to transition into a model that you're essentially selling, products, or we could call them programs, and package them in ways where you take control of your business model and your profitability. Because in normal agency structures, the cost unit that we all are familiar with is time, because we're paying people for time. But that's not to be confused with selling time. That's not a value unit in the eyes of the client, if that makes sense. They want to buy specific outcomes. And if you can build your business so you're selling outcomes and your margin pretty much going into a new project or a new relationship with a client, then you have something really golden. Now, that means you can productize your offerings to, let's say, 80%. You can provide 20% customization. That's all great. Your margin might fluctuate a little bit. That's fine. But don't do what everyone else is doing, where you just go into a new project, a new relationship, a new client engagement, and where you basically have really no control over your margins. So I spoke about the business model, revenue model really quickly. Business models, pretty much everyone's doing the done for you, which means we are delivering something for clients. That's great. You could also do a hybrid, or you could do done with you services where you're guiding, advising people how to do things. You could do done by you, or do it yourself. You could do some things that you templatize, you automate, like all the way down to online courses. You could do combinations of online tools, even SaaS combined with your expertise. Like there's endless different ways of doing this. The next thing I would look at is I want to make sure that you have a client acquisition machine built into your business. This is one of the things that agencies just lack. And it's such a pity, because you look at all these other industries and you realize all the other ones, except for the marketing pros, are doing it right. Now, that's exaggerating maybe a little bit, but I'm not far from the truth. Because most agencies, most consultancies rely on what I call random referrals, which means, yes, we're getting our business through referrals, which is great. Somebody believes in us, somebody thinks we're great, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. What I want you to do, and what I would want you to do if we were to work together, is to build a system for generating leads consistently, so you never run out of clients. And you do it by building thought leadership, by really showing the world, the world of your ideal client, who you are and why they should choose you, and you provide value up front. And we are not that creative in this industry in terms of doing that. It's just very generic, boring stuff, people going on LinkedIn and this and that. There's so many smarter ways to do that. So you need creativity, you need great ideas, and then you need a repeatable process that you turn into a system, and you track that system very carefully. From how do we reach people? How do we connect and earn their interest and trust? How do we activate these people? How do we engage with them? How do we nurture? How do we follow up? How do we close the deal? We need to have a process, a documented process for doing all these things. Now, then a couple more. The next thing I want to talk about is your whole operating system. Your client acquisition system is part of your operating system. The operating system essentially is how you deliver value. And the value delivery process is so important. Think of this as like an assembly line that runs through your business. Like Henry Ford was the guy who, I guess, invented it or popularized the idea of the assembly line. So you want to have a bit of a conveyor belt business, even though you might not like that word, because maybe you're a creative and you think, oh, that's gonna, make us really like stiff and we're always gonna deliver the same thing. Yes and no. You can provide great levels of customization and creativity without having to be an all custom, service provider. I want you to be a thought leader. I want you to be somebody who can deliver big transformational outcomes with a lot of creativity if that's what you're selling, but within standardized, systematized processes. And your operating system is key. Without a great operating system, you're never going to scale. You're going to have a lot of headaches. You're going to run a circus business, not an agency. Believe me, I've been there. I did it myself, and I got to a few million, and I couldn't scale beyond that because it just got more chaotic the more we grew. Once you have the operating system all dialed in, it's working. You don't want to scale a business that is not healthy at the core. By the way, you're just going to scale up your problems. Now it's time to scale, and that's really fun. It could be hard, but it's definitely going to be fun. Scaling up and also optimizing, I might add, really means, again, I'll go back to what I talked about before, which is the money equation. We look at your money equation specifically and ask ourselves, okay, how can we scale up, new sales opportunities and make it, generate more leads, I should have said. How can we convert better? How can we just do more of the stuff that works? And how can we do it in a leveraged way? And so I've documented over 100 different, what I call growth multipliers, which are ways to improve your results and scale them up in all these 6 areas that I introduced, the money equation. And so, for example, it's like if you have only one way to acquire leads, let's add the second, the third, the fourth, and let's get an exponential, increase in just leads. The same we can do with like the average price you're getting per transaction. We can do things to increase the average price. Let's say it's only 10% here, but let's say we also do that with the new amount of leads that we're getting. We're also keeping clients longer. We're introducing back-end offerings. We're doing things to boost our margins, and all these different things, they will give you an exponential growth in your profits. And so this is really key. And the final thing I want to leave you with is build a business that you will be able to exit. Exit can mean, it can mean leaving for a vacation first, but then ultimately, at some point, I'm sure you'd like to sell it and get a really good price for all that hard work. And the way to do that is to build it years in advance. And I'm just going to drop a couple of things that are super, super important. First of all, nobody wants to buy an agency that is dependent on the owner. So you have to deal with the owner dependency issue. You cannot be the person, the linchpin that everything depends on. We have to put in, and implement professional management, because there's no other way that you're going to be able to sell your company. You're going to get a really, really bad multiple for it. The other things are, I mentioned professional management, also client diversification. Your business cannot be dependent on 1 or 2 clients for more than 20% of revenue, ideally less. And I know so many agencies that are fully dependent on 1 to 2 clients for 50 to 80% of their whole business. So they're like basically 1 or 2 phone calls away from going bust. So you don't want to do that. So there are a number of things. There's a program called Exit Wealthy, which has all the different things baked into it that you need to prepare for to be able to exit at a significant multiple. And all the other things that I talked about, they directly link to your enterprise value, to your valuation. Why? Because buyers want to buy a cash machine. They want to buy a predictable way to generate cash that they can rely on. And the way that most people are running their agencies is anything but that. private equity, strategic buyers, they love professional services as long as they're built this way. That's why this model is a value-based model. It's a predictable model where you systematize, you standardize, you productize, you build a conveyor belt business, and that is the type of business they want to buy. Anyways, I hope that gave you something to think about. I went through these points quite quickly. This is what I do inside my change programs at The Simple Company. You could read more at thesimplecompany.com. And I also have a mastermind and collective called Original Minds, which you can join and get all this help. It's a little bit more affordable than working with me one-on-one. And the benefit also is that you'll meet other great entrepreneurs within the space. You could also collaborate. You could cross-sell. You could share resources. We can learn from each other. In addition to me, helping you implement these changes to transform your business, to scale your business, and prepare for an eventual exit down the line. So if you're interested in that, just go to thesimplecompany.com, and just book a call with me. Let's have a conversation. Let me do a quick audit on your business, and I'll tell you genuinely what I believe you should be doing, whether we're a good fit, and then we'll find some great options. Thank you so much. I'll be back with more.